Ever since the creation of the first smallpox inoculation, vaccines have been an integral part of disease prevention and enabling widespread immunity. When the 1952 poliomyelitis outbreak caused mass hysteria in parents worldwide, scientists were spurred into taking action. 2 vaccines, one oral and one injection, were developed by rival scientists Dr. Albert Sabin and Dr. Jonas Salk in response to the epidemic that caused the paralysis and death of thousands of children. Despite the debate between vaccines, Salk's was finalized first and administered across the United States. Dr. Sabin instead chose to take his prowess and collaborate with virologists in the Soviet Union. In spite of the tensions of the Cold War, the US and USSR were able to put aside their differences and exhibit scientific diplomacy, which saved millions of young lives across the globe. Polio was one of the most dangerous and hysteria-inducing diseases of the 20th century, raging through towns in massive epidemics. While some had a quick recovery from the virus, others suffered temporary or often permanent paralysis and even death. This disease took an enormous toll on young lives as it primarily affected children. The virus was proved to spread through person-person contact, nasal and oral secretions, and contact with contaminated feces. In about 98% of cases, polio is a mild illness with little to no symptoms. However, in certain cases that cause paralysis, the virus leaves the digestive tract and travels through the bloodstream to attack nerve cells. Parents were filled with a sense of dread due to a lack of understanding regarding the lethal, paralyzing virus. Due to the fear of spreading the contagion, cities across the U.S. closed pools, swimming holes, movie theaters, and schools. Even churches were shuttered, forcing priests to reach out to their congregations via radio. The random pattern of the disease and lack of a cure made parents feel helpless. The poliomyelitis pandemic caused scientists, countries, and organizations all over the world to join forces and create a solution. The result was the creation of 2 effective vaccinations. The United States was extremely supportive of the first viable polio vaccine created by Dr. Jonas Salk.
He had an invitation to go to Russia, and my father kicked himself for allowing himself to miss that opportunity to go to meet with the scientists in Russia, to help them understand what he was doing with the inactivated vaccine, the results that had been obtained, and so on, with the intention that they would be able to help them with their own use, trials, etc. of the vaccine.
The National Foundation for Infantile Paralysis, also known as the March of Dimes, was started by then-President Franklin D. Roosevelt, himself being a survivor of polio. He contracted the disease later in life and was left permanently paralyzed and wheelchair-ridden. This organization granted everyday citizens the ability to donate and help fund the costs surrounding vaccinations. In spite of U.S. support, Salk's injection was actually considered experimental and risky in the scientific community because a killed virus vaccine had never been done before. The originality raised concerns among many scientists, which caused them to question its efficacy. Some suspected that once the virus was no longer alive, it lost its ability to prevent polio. Another Jewish-American scientist, Dr. Albert Sabin, chose to take his oral polio vaccine and collaborate with the Soviet Union. Although Dr. Salk began his research 20 years later, Sabin's oral polio vaccine actually completed before Dr. Salk. This meant that the Sabin vaccine was given approval first in the United States, where production began.
In this whole process was Albert Sabin. He was moving more slowly. It takes a longer time to produce an attenuated, weakened virus vaccine. So he went to Russia, his country of birth, and they embraced this project, this undertaking.
Unlike what happened with Dr. Salk, scientists widely accepted Sabin's oral polio vaccine. This is because previous vaccinations, such as the smallpox vaccine, also contained attenuated live viruses. When Dr. Sabin finally finished mutating the viral strands for his vaccine, he decided to share his findings with Soviet scientists. Because the United States already had the March of Dimes underway, Sabin understood that he could be of more help by allowing USSR children to be protected from polio as well. There was only one issue: the Cold War. However, this problem had a clear diplomatic solution: the Lacey-Zarubin Agreement. Signed in 1958 by U.S. Special Assistant to East-West Exchanges William S.B. Lacey and Soviet diplomat George Zarubin, this agreement ensured collaboration in regards to exchanges in the cultural, technical, and educational fields. This was incredibly impactful, as the 2 nations had been staunch military and political rivals since the end of their alliance in World War II. According to historian Dora Varga, this was made possible because the slight thaw that followed Stalin's death opened up new opportunities for exchange, and Khrushchev's secret speech against Stalin's rule had significant effects on biomedical sciences. Sabin's polio vaccine checked all the boxes. In a remarkable demonstration of vaccine diplomacy, Sabin himself sent his live virus vaccine strands overseas to Soviets Dr. Mikhail Chumakov and his wife Dr. Marina Voroshilova. The Russians promised Sabin an invitation to Russia, and when it was received, he jumped at the chance. After 2 intensive FBI interrogations, Sabin was able to travel to Leningrad and Moscow in June of 1956. He spent a month in Russia meeting with scientists, giving lectures, and all the time lobbying for his vaccine. In reality, the relationship between Sabin and Chumakov involved much more than providing samples of the vaccine. They shared information on their ongoing research programs, and Sabin shared with the Soviet virologist his laboratory techniques and critical apparatus for conducting the trial and analyzing the results. After testing an early vaccine on several young family members and taking the risk of journeying to the United States to meet with Sabin, Chumakov pursued the aid of Soviet official Anastasis Mikoyan. During a conversation between the Soviet scientists, Chumakov was adamant that Sabin's vaccine was reliable and effective. "Are you sure this is a good vaccine, Mikhail?" Mikoyan asked. "And that it's safe?" "Yes," the virologist replied. "I'm absolutely sure." "Then go ahead," Mikoyan said. Unlike in the United States, there were no controls or placebos, and no children were denied the vaccine. Chumakov stated that their sole aim was to wipe out polio. This vaccine diplomacy resulted in massive vaccine trials on Soviet children, which led to the oral vaccination of approximately 100 million adolescents in the Eastern Bloc by 1960. After Chumakov received the Honorable Lenin Prize in 1963 for his work on the polio vaccination, he told Albert Sabin, "I consider you to be one of the main heroes of this event. Soviet virologists and with them millions of parents are eternally grateful to you." The challenges and triumphs regarding the polio vaccines paved the way for modern medical advancements, especially relating to disease response. Today, nations across the world have been impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. It's clear that COVID and polio share several scientific and social similarities. Both have yet to be successfully eradicated, although polio researchers have come incredibly close to doing so. In fact, an updated version of Dr. Sabin's OPV is in the research stages as of yet. Additionally, the outbreaks each demonstrated scientific diplomacy, where competing foreign powers united to fight and prevent the disease. However, unlike with polio, which was widely accepted across various ethnic groups and populations, COVID-19 was met with a large amount of vaccine hesitancy.
It's not only been scientific issues that have impeded it, but also relationship issues. There's been resistance to the vaccination program based on religious issues, political issues, cultural issues, and that has been another major impediment. And you've already raised the issue about social media and anti-vaccine sentiments today, which is clearly an enormous issue.
According to Dr. Chumakov's son, Pyotr, "My parents were sure that it was safe. The relatives were all for it too, as everyone understood the dangers of polio and believed that the vaccine would protect children from the disease." This is unlike many present-day parents who fear the long-term effects of the COVID-19 vaccine.
There's always been fear about new things and fear about vaccines, but it just really has grown enormously out of proportion. And what we've experienced now in this era of this coronavirus pandemic has really been extreme. And even people who should know better, I would expect and anticipate that they would have a broader understanding, have just gotten so caught up in these notions of conspiracies that are taking place.
Overall, various countries were able to successfully respond to the terrifying polio epidemic with scientific research and diplomacy. The United States and Soviet Union specifically put aside the tensions regarding their arms race and allowed virologists of both nations to share vaccine-related information with each other. These epidemiological successes enabled polio cases to decrease dramatically, to the point where the virus is not considered to be much of a threat anymore. Both Salk and Sabin refused to patent their vaccines, demonstrating selflessness and a desire to act in the common interest of the world. Today, in more modernized countries such as the United States, where the wild type of virus has been eradicated, an updated formaldehyde-free version of the Salk vaccine is most commonly used. This one has a much lower risk of vaccine-derived poliovirus compared to Sabin's oral vaccine. Both vaccines have been able to prevent young children, adults, and families from receiving polio if exposed. Yet in spite of the mutual successes, there still remains a debate in regards to the safety and strength of both. The creation of the 2 polio vaccines, particularly Sabin's, demonstrated that despite differences or disputes, countries are still able to do what's best for the common good.
Hi ho, research will win, we know. If we all pitch in, we're bound to win with a hi ho, hi ho, hi ho, hi ho. We'll lick the polio with dimes and quarters and our dollars, ho, hi ho.